Launched in 2004 as a personal response to the anti-gay state of the political landscape, Pam's House Blend has been critically and nationally acclaimed ever since, including being honored as the best LGBT blog in the 2005 and 2006 Weblog Awards, and consistently being ranked in the top 50 progressive political blogs. Pam Spaulding, the editor and publisher of Pam's House Blend, has guest posted or contributed to numerous progressive blogs, including The Rude Pundit, which is about funding, Fire Dog Lake, and the Billerico Project. She has also written for the Independent Weekly and holds the distinction of being the first out lesbian columnist for a major newspaper with her monthly column in the Raleigh News and Observer's The Durham News. With roots in both North Carolina and New York, Ms. Spaulding considers herself to have dual citizenship status, as both a Southerner and a Yankee. She brings that perspective and voice to her blog, focusing on current political events, LGBT and women's rights, the influence of the far right, and race relations. But she's not just limited to the Webiverse and print media. Ms. Spaulding provided commentary during the 2008 presidential election, spoke at national forums, and, my personal favorite, performed the first ever live blogging event for both the Service Members Legal Defense Network's 2006 annual dinner and the National Black Justice Coalition's second annual Black Church Summit. She has landed exclusive interviews with openly gay political candidates and legislators, including Jim Neal and Tammy Baldwin. Ms. Spaulding has received numerous awards and acclamations. I'm just going to name a few of them right now, but understand there are others. The Distinguished Achievement Award from the Monette Horwitz Trust for making significant contributions toward the eradication of homophobia. She was named as one of Huffington Post's Ultimate Game Changers in Politics in 2009. She received the Women's Media Center Award for Online Journalism, and she was listed as one of the Out 100 for the year 2009. She has a BA in Media Studies from Fordham University and serves as the Information Technology Manager at Duke University Press. She's a board member of the Institute of Southern Studies, which publishes the award-winning investigative journalism publication, Southern Exposure, and the blog Facing South, for which she sits on the media advisory group. Please help me welcome the editor and publisher of Pam's House Blend, Pam Spaulding.
Thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you to Nell for inviting me to speak. Normally, I am an introvert. I have learned to put on the extrovert hat every once in a while and speak. But I'm certainly not an introvert online, but I think that's probably true of a lot of bloggers. Actually, last week I was at Netroots Nation, which is the largest gathering of progressive bloggers. I was on 3 panels, and it's a wonderful way for a lot of us who only talk to one another in the online world to see each other offline. And I've made wonderful friends and rivals. And this particular year was very interesting because I got to go with dual credentials to both Netroots Nation and Right Online, which is a conference of conservatives that follows us every year to whatever venue that we are at. And it was enlightening to walk over to the other side of the aisle. We were warmly welcomed, and I had credentials and sat in on some of their sessions, which were very different from the ones that are held on the left. Very formal. I've never seen so many suits in my life in one gathering. And a surprising lack of women. Wonder why. But I have been always out of the closet as an adult. And one of the things, I'm obviously a feminist, a person of color, a lesbian, and one of the things that I seem to be called upon a lot is to discuss my life as a Southerner. The misconceptions about the South, particularly for my political blogging friends who live in blue states, is it's appalling, some of the ignorance they have about the South. Now, we have a lot to explain about some of the behaviors of our politicians, but by and large, there are many LGBTs who live in these red states, or purple states. My state is really purple. But we haven't the rights or equality that many of our blue state brothers and sisters have. My wife works for the state of North Carolina. She can be fired for being gay. That's one of the reasons I'm not a full-time blogger. I have that job at Duke University Press, which provides me with same-sex spousal equivalent benefits. So if she were to lose her job, she could go on my health benefits. But what does that do? That ties me to a job that I'd rather not be doing. I'd rather be doing full-time activism, blogging. But that's why I moved back from New York to go to my home state, because you have to do some of the hard work yourself. And I felt that because there are so few people who are out and activists, as opposed to being out and going to the bar every Friday, or showing up at Pride, where we have tens of thousands of people, but when we have a lobby day, well, we're lucky if we get 300 to go talk to their state legislators about the state of political equality in North Carolina. I'm happy to say, and this is one big place where now can step in, is we really need a good out representation of straight allies. I think we know we're not going to win equality without the help of straight allies, and not just people who are supportive of their relatives or friends who are LGBT, but willing to take on bigotry among people that they know. It's one thing to be an ally in the closet, it's another one to be able to speak to our issues to someone who is ignorant about our issues. But I have to lay some of the blame at the doorstep of our community. We have a lot of divisiveness within our community in relation to race, gender identity in particular, rampant misogyny, just like any other group. I mean, we're all connected by the same thread that we do not have full equality in this country. And even at that point, we have divisions among regions of the country where some have more equality than others. I think that one of the things that maybe most of you have heard of is that there's the debate in New York right now where they're having a vote. I don't know when it is, but I haven't checked. Friday? Okay. So it's been changing or shifting, or whether or not the Republicans are going to prevent the vote. But most people have heard of that issue. Rarely do people hear about the issues going on in Minnesota, where we were for Netroots Nation, where they're going to face a marriage amendment on the ballot next year. North Carolina has the first Republican legislature since Reconstruction, and the first thing they did was to introduce a marriage amendment bill. So that's going to be on the ballot, if it manages to get out, and it may just do that, in 2012, where North Carolina will be hosting the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte. That's really embarrassing. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to go to these conferences and hear over and over about marriage equality, marriage equality. We don't even have the right to not be fired from our jobs in a lot of these states. So we really need to come together, not only as a community, but to the broader ally community, to actually have these conversations. They may be uncomfortable, but it's certainly, it's probably more comfortable than having to deal with having another Republican in the White House. I can be partisan, so I don't care. But I think that the way we can best help allies is to spread information. And we do a really good job of it as bloggers online. I mean, obviously there's no restriction. Anyone can come to our blogs if you know the URL, and to read and learn more about our issues. And I think that because we have become more adept at spreading messages via Twitter, Facebook, and our blogs, I do all three because I have to cover all my bases. And I think that I had no idea that my personal activism would become so public. Ranting and ranting about the Bush administration in 2004 just to let off steam. Obviously some people found my blog because I wasn't posting anywhere and just agreed with me and started to comment. But now I have about 30,000 registered users at my blog. That only meant, and only a small portion of those people are actually commenters, but that means there are a lot of people reading. But I knew I was making headway when I started to get invited to panels and things, but I think the thing that sold the deal, that there were people reading who were in high places, is when I was at my mother-in-law's house, and I'm, padding around in my PJs, and my cell phone rings, and I go, and I just managed to pick it up before it went to voicemail, and it was the White House. It was the White House Communications Office saying that, that's not fair what you just posted on your blog. Right? The first question was, how did you get my cell phone number? Right? He didn't tell me how, but I figured he found it somehow. But I just told him, look, if you have some other point of view you'd like to put across, send me an email. I'll be happy to post your response to it. So ever since then, I've been slightly paranoid, but pleased that people in the White House are reading my blog, even though we have been quite a thorn in the side of the Obama administration.
Good.
And that's not just our issues, I mean, I think the LGBT issues, but it's about, you know, again, women's health, all kinds of the treatment of the media, not taking bloggers as legitimate citizen journalists, which we are, and being able to tell the difference between people who are just complaining versus people who are interviewing, going out in the field and doing online and offline activism like I do. I go to speak at gay straight alliances at high schools in my state to get to hear what young people are thinking about, people who are coming out of the closet earlier, but having to deal with issues about, you know, family issues, worrying about can they go to college if they get rejected, and then the interesting phenomenon of kids who are out in high school but go back into the closet when they go to university or college. The closer they get to having to go out into the working world, the more paranoid they are about how they will be treated as LGBT. And I think that that's a sad thing, but I think the best antidote to that is for people who have passed into the working world to go back to these schools, to talk to these kids. Because one of the, I guess, the side effects of being out of the closet and being able to have a social life, they forget about being political. And I think that being able to tell them that the rights that you have, however few you may have them in your state, is due to a lot of hard work, tears, blood, and other kinds of sacrifices by people who have gone before you. And that's why I think that there's so many parallels between the feminist agenda and the LGBT agenda. You know, it scares both Democrats and Republicans equally. And I think being out noisy is a very effective way to do it. And as we learned during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell battle, which is not over yet, the President and the Joint Chiefs all have to certify, so it's not a fantasy that is repealed. But during the political struggle to get it repealed legislatively, we learned very well that direct action, that people would go out and chain themselves to the White House fence. That didn't please people at HRC, it didn't make people feel good in the White House. That's one form of activism that's perfectly legitimate. Blogs are legitimate. Working through organizations is a legitimate way to gain political effectiveness. They're all needed. And we work at cross purposes by continuing to work at loggerheads when we could just actually work together more often. I think that it's possible to do that. And I think it's more effective if we have allies. I think that the irony of this, and this has only happened in the last week, I don't know how many people have heard about the fake lesbian blogger scandal, where the purported Syrian-American blogger and her editor at Let's Get Real both turned out to be white, straight men on Wednesday. Talk about a ballsy amount of privilege going on there. But the irony is, they would have been much more powerful voices if they had been straight men blogging as straight men. I think that we need people to be out who aren't gay. We need to have advocates that are strong. The fact that I don't even want to explain the psychology of why they did that, but and it's painful because a lot of the positions were very in sync with our community. But I told some people at Lenders Nation that. We just lost 2 lesbian voices in the last week. Legitimate voices. So it's really down, because I'm a person of color who's blogging in a very hardball political environment, I oftentimes when I go to conferences where it's just LGBT, I might be the only person of color in the room, certainly the only lesbian sometimes, and almost frequently I'm the only Southerner. And like I said, that's a punishing thing to have to defend at this point. but I think that it is what it is. And I wish there were more of me willing to come out of the closet and speak to the issues. But the larger LGBT community has to understand that it is very, very hard for people of color, either Latino or Black, to come out of the closet, period. There are different kinds of ways that religion enters the argument that makes it much more difficult. They can lose a sense of community if they come out. And it's safe to say that the white LGBT community is not more welcoming. It's a sad thing to have to say in 2011, but race is a problem in all, cuts across all boundaries. And until it's a safe space and a safe place for people of color to come out, we're going to have this problem. So I really feel a personal responsibility to be out for those who can't be out. And I've always put my picture on my blog so people can self-identify. And I think the visibility issue is huge. And I only wish there were more people who are safe and could come out. Just don't, they feel that it's too activist to ask for your rights and demand your rights. I find that a paradox when people in the Black civil rights movement were willing to have their heads broken open for their rights. I think people need to think back to that. And one of the most memorable things in recent memory that I can point to was having met John Lewis, Representative John Lewis. This is a man who bled for the movement and is a strong LGBT ally. He's had to take a lot of heat from the Black community, a religious conservative, socially conservative Black community, and I don't want that broad brush painted over every Black person, because I've seen that on my blog where we had, in the wake of Proposition 8, every Black person imaginable was being blamed for it passing, when in fact they're a minuscule percentage of the voting population. It was scary to see how quickly I lost my gay card because of my Black card. So I think that we have a lot of work to do, and this is within a community where, you know, I'm generally liked, but certainly I became demonized for a few weeks there for simply pointing out the fact that racism exists in the LGBT community, which is absurd. Just as what exists against transgender people who are fighting for their rights. We've had calls within the community to say, oh, let's pass employment non-discrimination and cut off the trans folk. That happened just a couple of years ago. And I say no. You don't go back. You can't leave anyone behind. You just can't. In many of the states where sexual orientation was passed, anti-discrimination legislation, now they're having to go back to try to fight for trans rights. And that's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. That's why you don't leave anyone behind in these bills. You can't wait for that to happen. In fact, New York has had sexual orientation discrimination, anti-discrimination laws in place, and they can't get gender passed. So we have to remember those steps. They're baby steps that we take, but if not everyone is out ready to face the battle, online or offline, because you can do it both ways. You can put op-eds in your editorial of your newspaper, you can start a blog, you can join a blog. Like Pam's House Blend is a diary-written community blog, so anyone can write a post. It doesn't have to be someone who's a writer. And I've invited many, in fact, every person who's a contributor on my blog started as a commenter or a diarist, because you get these grassroots input from all over the country, in fact some around the world, and they know what my perspective is. They know how I feel as a feminist, and I get challenged on it, because natural tensions exist between men and women no matter your sexual orientation, and I feel that there's a spot to educate and to listen, because it is important to listen, and in the terms of race, it's extremely important to let people ask stupid questions. You know, don't take everything personally. I've seen race pie fights break out on blogs because someone will ask the question, how do you do your hair? I mean, that I've gotten lots of hair politics questions, which, you know, people used to think that was silly until Donna miscalled the Rutgers basketball team a bunch of nappy-headed hoes. Most of them had hair relaxed, so I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but then people took it seriously. So embracing all of our diversity and engaging straight allies, embracing people who are tentative about coming out to convince them to be part of the movement for equality in general. We all are waiting for that equality to happen, and I want it to happen in my lifetime.